Well, I'm Brett Dolan, and I'm always excited to talk to players and coaches who are excited to be playing basketball at this time of the year. And I think that applies for the Cincinnati Bearcats and head coach Katrina Merriweather. Coach, it's been kind of a wild year one for you back at your alma mater, but I have a feeling your young ladies are pretty excited about playing basketball.
They are. They're very excited. I think that we came in and we start talking about, postseason. I don't know that they thought it was a reality, but the message has always been we don't have spring break here. We're going to practice and work really hard to make sure we play after our conference tournament.
I heard you say that this week at a media availability back in Cincinnati, and it rung with me because sometimes it's just a simple statement I think that can become kind of a rallying cry or an expectation. No spring break because that means you're playing basketball at this time of the season.
That's right, especially here. I didn't have spring break when I played here, so they don't get it either.
That's a good point. You played in four different postseason tournaments, and I'm sure every year was a little bit different. Some was about building for the next season. Some's about just enjoying a last ride with a few seniors and veterans. But is there one postseason memory from your time at Cincinnati that maybe is something you lean back on even as you coach?
Well, believe it or not, it's my fifth year when I was a graduate assistant because that year I was doing my clinical experience as a teacher. And so I was getting up in the morning at 7:30 in a classroom until about 11:30. Then I'd jump in the car and I would change my clothes really quick and drive to practice to be here from 12 to 3. That team won the conference tournament championship. That team made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Keep in contact with a lot of people from that team because I give them credit for propelling my coaching career. So yeah, I think that that's my favorite, even though that's not the one I played in. That's the one where I saw this program have its most success, and I'll never forget being on that ride.
It's interesting because some players might be a little bit disappointed that they were part of postseason runs, but not an NCAA tournament. And even though you weren't playing, I think the best outlook is it did help you in your coaching career because that's when you had kind of made a little bit of a transition from playing to a different role.
Absolutely. And I think that it will always be my most beneficial year. I think if you have an opportunity to stay and be a part of the program where you were a player, all the things that I thought made my coaches nuts, I get on the other side and I'm like, oh, we're the problem. God. Look at this, and I think I share that with our kids a lot because I tell them, hey, I remember being in your shoes and I remember feeling like there were some things that I didn't like or I didn't agree with, only to become a coach, and then everything starts to make perfect sense.
Is there anything from that background that might prepare you for going 2+ weeks without playing, the old rest versus rust debate that you guys have going on? It probably feels like it's been forever since you've been out there in a competitive game.
It absolutely does. And we have a tremendous strength and conditioning coach. I'm really blessed with a phenomenal staff. They always keep me level and don't let me get too high with the highs or low with the lows. And she's already suggested we've got to play a game. So you got to put 4 quarters up there and we just got to go through our rotations and all those things. Otherwise, from a conditioning standpoint and just creating a little bit of anxiety, game anxiety, right? That we probably better not have had our last game on March 8th if we plan on playing on the 25th or 26th.
Big picture, just take me through what year one was like for you. I mean, it's a couple of amazing seasons at Memphis, 22 wins last year, took them to the Sweet 16 of the WNIT. You get a chance to come back to your alma mater. It's a new league for Cincinnati, a new team. There's no shortage of newness for you, even though it's a familiar return to Cincy.
Yeah, a new address. I mean, when you're a student athlete in the 90s, you barely leave campus. And so everyone's like, oh, it's so familiar to you, you know where to live. Like, I didn't live anywhere except in the dorms or an apartment down the street. So there were plenty of familiarity because of the people. My SWA Maggie was a student athlete when I was a basketball player. She was on the track and field team. And I think that that's probably my biggest comfort zone and my safety net is that I get to walk in here every day with someone who also walked being a student athlete here at Cincinnati. I think that our really tough non-conference schedule, like we end up 8-3 and we're playing Colorado, NC State, and Louisville. I'm like, oh, okay, well, welcome. Welcome to the new Cincinnati, the transitioning Power Five Cincinnati, and I think that I was stretched and challenged during that time, knowing what was coming. Like we knew the Big 12 was going to be incredibly tough when you have to play Texas and Baylor. And I don't know if anyone knew Kansas State at one point would be the number 2 team in the country in West Virginia gets a new coach, but yet they don't miss a beat. There's all these teams that are just really, really talented and they have great coaches. And I think it's just been a really great learning experience for me and my staff. And we've tried to walk it with some patience where we are celebrating all the small victories.
As a Hawkeye, I know altogether too well about Kansas State, but I digress because you mentioned your staff, and I got to believe this is where you lean on them. This is where you bring in quality people that you trust and because as you get pulled in different directions, like visiting with me or whatever the case may be, you have to have a quality staff to kind of help you through this crazy year number one.
They're the main reason. And I do have a tremendous support staff in general. My parents, my family, everybody's about an hour and a half away. All four of my grandparents are still alive, and we do weekly check-ins. And so I'm blessed in more ways than I can even remotely describe. But here, this is a family as well. So Ashley Barlow, who I've known since she was 8 years old, has been with me every day that I've been a head coach. She knows our offense. If I'm on the phone or I'm doing something, she runs practice just like I was in there. And I think that's incredible and speaks volumes for her. Abby Jump is one of the best recruiters in the country, and she's somebody I had the pleasure of being an assistant coach and coaching her at Wright State. So she's very much family. And then my actual blood sister, is our other assistant. And well, we were taught the game by the same person. So, so I think that our dad has had a great influence on us. And so when I walk away, those are my coaches that are running practice. People come in and they watch and they're like, "Oh, I'll let you go." And I'm like, "It's fine. It's fine. It runs itself with those three." I had a former players, my video coordinator, Mikkel Miller, Abby Owens, helped you get to me waiting for me while I was doing something today because she's great. And Ryan Paul is our equipment guy. So I've got these 8 people, including my 2 GAs, that just run around doing everything for me, for each other, for these players. And it makes every day a lot of fun.
There might be a few people watching or listening right now a little bit jealous of your support system to have all of your grandparents still living and being able to come, and then to have people that have been with you and family members. This is a crazy world we live in college sports, unlike anything else. And to have people you've been around and trust just makes the days go by a little bit easier.
It does. And I have 2 100-pound labs at home. And so they love me whether we win, lose, or we can get a stop or we turn the ball over 20 times. And so I'm happy every time I walk in my door. So again, I can't use the word blessed enough. I'm fortunate and blessed for sure.
I like that. And obviously, there are challenges. You talked this week about the Big 12. And I think one of the things that you said about the league that makes perfect sense to me or anybody else is how deep the rosters are. But the other part that you mentioned, Coach, was you have to play well because you can't come in and have a game where you're not clicking on all cylinders and probably pull it out. You're going to have to play well over the course of a game. And is that something that you have to go through a full year as a player to be able to fully understand if maybe you've played the American Conference and now you're going up against Big 12 opponents?
I think so. And I'm always really careful because playing in the Horizon League, there were some really great coaches there and really great coaches in the American. When I could name off 5 or 6 that have been in contention for National Coach of the Year. So I think that the difference is that there's so much consistency at this level. You have coaches that have been at the head of these programs for 15, 20 years. So they don't have to rebuild. They literally just restock. And I think that we're sometimes in a mid-major conference when there's turnover, it takes a year or 2, maybe even 3. Well, these programs that we're competing against, they don't have down years. So every year we fully expect to come in. I mean, look at what TCU did, with all the injuries that they've had and the recruiting that they did and how they were able to compete right away. And I think that's just the biggest difference is that you have to suit up every night knowing that you can go 0-18 in this league. And that was part of what we were thinking. Like, what if we don't play well enough on the night of the games where we have the best chance of winning? This can go really bad. And so when we started to play, and I think our team started to buy in, and we got some consistency with our roster and our lineups and substitution patterns, I think we had some days where we were really good. And when we weren't really good, we just didn't have a chance in the last couple of minutes, which is what our goal always is.
It makes perfect sense to me because I think back to some of my kids, and I've got a 17-year-old, 18-year-old playing softball. and she's on a pretty good team this year, but you've been on some teams in the past where you look at the games that you really want to win because maybe there's not a ton of those on your schedule. And you're like, we have to play well here. If we don't play well against these teams, we're in trouble because there's a couple of other teams that are scheduled that are going to be really tough. And it does start to narrow down that focus. And I think the one thing that you also mentioned this week that at times you felt like your teams played well and poorly and average all in the same game. And I know the challenge of coaches is how do you extend that really well segment for longer periods of time? And I got a feeling that's probably something, if you don't know already, you'll spend a lot of time talking with your coaches and other coaches in the offseason as you go into year two.
Absolutely. And I always bring up the fact that we have Maya Jackson, who we slated to play 30 minutes a game as our point guard. And then when she did not come back, we then had to play that point guard position by committee. So we're talking four different guards as we're trying to get them time, but not too much time, but enough time to get comfortable. And I think that that was probably our biggest obstacle. We have a lot of really good forwards and centers, and I don't know that they got to showcase everything they were capable of because our concern was always handling the ball in the backcourt. And then once people know that that's something you struggle with, well, then you get pressed. So now here we are, and it didn't matter. Some people said, well, why do you talk about it? And I was like, oh, right, because people can't watch film and tell that if we can't get it past half court, we struggle scoring. And I think that that's what I admire so much about this team. This team still showed up and they battled and they competed and they did it for each other every day, knowing that there was a good chance that we could play really good and still not win. And then for a core of seven that we had that came from a league, they look back at that league and say, man, we really could have competed at the top two or three. And now here we are, a part of the bottom five. And I think all of those thoughts can be really discouraging if you don't have an environment and a culture and people that are determined just to keep fighting every day.
Well, makes sense. And again, as you just explained your point guard situation, if you can't initiate your offense or you go through some empty possessions, it does make things difficult. And the one thing I noticed looking at your numbers, if there may be some nights where you're not going to score as much as you like, but let's defend. I mean, you held opponents to 40% shooting, and that's hard to do. The 3-point shooting, teams were shooting about 28% against you. So make it tough for them to score if you're having a hard night scoring too.
Absolutely. We talk about defense, but more than anything, we talk about rebounding the ball because I think you can have a really good defensive segment in just a split second. One person doesn't box out or one person doesn't go attack the ball, and then you're giving up an easy two. So a lot of the things we talk about, what we marry, what we engage, and what we date. And we most certainly marry rebounding the ball so that we can work on finishing the play and then also sneak in some easy baskets ourselves on the offensive end.
Being a part of this WNIT for several years, I've seen Arizona sell out a championship game, and the next time they were in a tournament after COVID, go to the championship game. South Dakota State sold out and used that to propel them forward. Kansas last year, the same thing, 6 home games. And obviously that's a long run, and this is a 48-team bracket as opposed to 64. But what can this tournament do for you as far as not just change the narrative as far as we want to be in the postseason every year, but maybe that first step or that first build towards next year's team as well?
Well, I think what it does is gives our community another chance to support this team. And that has been the neat part for me, having played here over 20 years ago, where there were hardly anyone in the stands for a lot of different reasons. Cincinnati has a very short entertainment dollar because we've got an NFL team, an MLB team, and our men's team is awesome, et cetera, et cetera. So to see that people are coming out and watching women's basketball. And we have been drawing really well on weekends in particular, and our weekday games have grown too. So it is great for our program, but I think it's really great for our city, for there to be a women's basketball team that's still playing right now. And so I think that those are the benefits for us. But we also want to continue just to broaden the visibility. I think that the WNIT has been great for me as a coach. It has been great for my players. I think that it has also helped them bring some notoriety when they show up and they perform well. Well, now you're getting talked about a couple weeks after a lot of people's seasons are over. So there are so many advantages to I believe, playing in the WNIT, and we've been really, really fortunate to be a beneficiary of those things.
I completely agree as far as building a fan base, and any opportunity to kind of engage with them is important. And the way women's sports in general, certainly basketball, has just skyrocketed in the last decade is amazing. I don't know if you would have been able to foresee that, or it would have just been crazy considering in your day it just wasn't like it is now with every game on TV. And when you go on the road in the Big 12, you know what it's like when you see some of these crowds at Iowa State or Baylor or whatever else. I mean, it's a big time event.
It is. We had played at Iowa State when I was at Wright State. And so I remember walking in there a few years ago and looking around thinking this is amazing. And I think that what is really happening is people are seeing that people have been supporting women's basketball. So I think there was this, some people were under the impression that nobody's watching women's basketball, nobody's going to games. Well, now that these games are being televised, you're actually seeing people's crowds. You're like, wait a minute, is that place sold out? Because it looks like it. And so in a lot of these communities, like in Iowa State, you walk in and it you feel like the whole city's there. And I think it's been like that for a really long time. And because these games are now more visible to more people, I think people are realizing that this is a really awesome product and you should tune in and you should watch it.
I agree. It's kind of the chicken and egg argument, which one comes first. But I think once you see these big crowds, it encourages more people to tune in. Once they show up to watch or whether attend in person, they want to come back again. And I really think we're at kind of a crazy time again in college sports in general. But I think women's sports have a little more continuity than maybe the men's sports do, where you can see a player for 2 or 3 years and kind of build a relationship with fans that I think the men's sports are trying to figure out. But I do think it's just another opportunity for women's sports to continue to blossom.
I think it's important that we stay in our lane, and it doesn't have to be lesser or more insignificant. I think that what we offer is a product where we are very much available and we're very much accessible. And there isn't anything that can rush me off the court after a game. Even when we have media, I'm like, hey, you just got to wait a few minutes. Is if there's kids that whether they want pictures or autographs or a hug or a handshake, I think it's important that we continue to engage our fan base. We do play the game on the ground. We don't play it up high. There's not a lot of lobs and dunking and that sort of thing, but there's a lot of really amazing shooters and passers and defenders. And if we can continue to grow our game and get fans that are true fans of basketball, I think that that's where our game should be and where it's headed.
No, I think you're spot on with all of that. And I've seen so many teams that interact with fans or sign autographs or hang around a little bit longer, or maybe there's a personal connection. And I think sometimes we're in such a hurry to see everything be at the top level that we forget sometimes it's those little things that start building fan bases more than anything else.
What's the journey? And that's what we talk about all the time. Of course, we wanted to come in here in year one and go to the NCAA tournament and, finish in the top four. But the reality is that we are transitioning as a program, and we have players that play really well in the American League, but they were going to have to experience the Big 12 in order to understand what it really took. And how many of us understand things because of what we're told versus what we've actually gone through, and that is where we are with our program and what we are with our players. And I think that people enjoy that. They enjoy watching us battle even when we didn't come out with the win. I think they enjoy watching us play really hard and be tough and be gritty and rebound when we still were down 10 or 15 and there were 3 minutes left. I think all those things engaged our fan base because that's what they're bringing their kids to the game to see. They want people to see people working hard, our players doing everything they can to compete and not give up, because what we're doing is teaching life lessons through basketball anyway. And so that's what kept us going forward and up and positive was, hey, we're learning and we're growing. And are we disappointed? Yes. Am I frustrated? Yes. Are our players frustrated? Of course. They go out here and they practice, lift and run every day. They don't do that so that they can't come out with the W at the end. But I just love what this journey is doing. And I think it's the same thing for women's basketball in general.
I would agree. And I would imagine a win, 2 wins, 3 wins, whatever it is, and this WNIT run continues to build and add to that journey. And Katrina, one of the things I enjoy about this tournament is you've just gotten done with the slog of a Big 12. And there's no secrets. You go up and you battle these teams. You play them twice or 3 times. But sometimes then you get in the postseason and you're playing schools that you haven't scouted and maybe you know a little bit about. I think your staff has some connections with Eastern Kentucky, but Now you got to go back to work and you're playing a different team at a different level from a different conference. And that's crazy, I know, but it's also part of the fun, I think, of the postseason.
Well, it is, and we've been IPFW in Eastern Kentucky. The head coach of IPFW is from Fort Wayne, legit, which is a sister AU program from my dad's in Indiana. So I've known her since she was probably 13. And I think that that's what our basketball community is. So I remember her as a player, and so I know what kind of coach she is, and I know her kids are going to play hard. And if we think that just because we have Cincinnati across our chest, that either one of those opponents are just going to lay down and let us win, well, that's not what we did when we were at Wright State. In fact, those schools got our best effort and our biggest punch. And so I'm walking into those games not assuming that we're going to win at all, that we're going to, again, have to put together 40 minutes of basketball and really compete because, I mean, no one wants it to be their last game.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly where I was headed. When you're at Wright State, you're looking at an opportunity to play a team in the Big 12, and you're thinking, this is our chance to knock down one of the top dogs, or they're going to take us a little bit lightly, and this is our opportunity to make our mark. And you understand that even now that you're with Cincinnati. It's just a different side of the line, so to speak. But I'm sure that's a message you can relay to your young women without any problem whatsoever.
That is not an advantage that Eastern Kentucky or IPFW will have, is us coming in and taking them lightly. I am fully aware of what both teams and coaches are capable of. And like you mentioned, Abby Owens and Abby Jump both worked for Greg at Eastern Kentucky. So, there's going to be a lot of interconnectedness in either game, regardless of who wins. And we're excited for it for sure, but, taking it for granted, absolutely not.
I love it. I enjoy the conversation. Katrina Merriweather, Cincinnati, the Bearcats. Coach, thanks for the visit. Congratulations on what you've done in year one. I know there are even bigger and better things going forward in the future, but I'll enjoy watching your team at the WNIT, and we'll see how this shakes out for you guys.
That sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.